Yeah, we are alive now. Okay,
Oh
I hope
no.
Anne is not having network connection.
Okay, he's rejoining.
Okay,
There we
I
go.
guess we are alive now. So, morning, everyone, or evening from wherever you are. I am Soham, and I'm doing my PhD in physics. And today we have our first fireside chat with Amida Abbas, and I believe she is also doing her PhD in physics from University of KwaZulu Natal in quantum computing, and she has had a pretty interesting journey into the world of physics. So I would now give the like pass the lectern to say to Amira to talk about her journey. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and we can and there will be a Q&A session in the end. So off to you with Amira. If you want to share your screen now, you can go forward.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. Let me figure out. Okay, I think I see now how. Can you see the full screen of my slides?
Yes, I can see it.
Yep. Yeah. I can.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, great. Good. So yes, thank you guys for hosting me, for having me here, to hopefully give you an inspiring journey or talk. And generally, I actually don't like talking about myself. I prefer to talk about my research, but I think it's also good to get out of your comfort zone every now and then and remind yourself why we are doing these things, right? Why we're interested in finding out all these big and beautiful questions about the world, about physics, about computer science, about life. And yeah, so I'm very excited to tell you today, what got me started in this field of quantum computing and quantum machine learning. And so I just put together a few slides to tell you a bit about myself. Hopefully something resonates with you. But if you have any questions at all, please feel free to type them in the chat. I can't see the chat, so I think Sohami will just tell me if a question comes up.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, please feel free to. Okay, great. Then feel free to stop me at any time. I don't mind. Like, we make this as interactive as you guys want. Okay, so yes, my name is Amira, and I guess the first thing I want to tell you is where I'm from. So I'm from a small city in South Africa. It's called Durban. Oh, actually, maybe not so small. It's about the third biggest city in South Africa. And I think I'm now like fourth generation South African. So my parents were born here, their parents were born here. And I think if we trace back to our history, then we're probably brought here through like slaves and British colony and all this kind of stuff. But I very much think of myself as African born, African bred. And I feel very strongly about where I'm from. And yeah, so I grew up here, and my parents were not very wealthy when we started, right? So I think my father's first job was selling newspapers on the street to people driving past, and then his next job was selling movie tickets at a movie theater. So my parents were not very well off, but they were very hardworking, and one thing they valued very much was education. So they saved a lot of money for me to go to this wonderful school, and I'm very grateful for this. I went to a school called Crawford in Durban, and it's one of the best schools, and they put such a premium on education that was instilled in me from the time I was little, that learning and educating yourself is something that's really important. So I went to Crawford, and I was very grateful for this, but I always wanted to live somewhere else. So I wanted to try and go to a different city and see what it was like to study somewhere else. So in South Africa, one of the best universities, or one of the highest ranked universities, is the University of Cape Town. So I always had my heart set on this university, but I had no idea what I wanted to study. So I always knew that I enjoyed mathematics as a child, and I felt very excited when I would see mathematical theory and equations. But I just I couldn't go and study a pure maths degree because my parents would be like, "What are you going to do with this?" And when you come from a conservative family, the question is always like, what job are you going to get with this? And you either do a doctor's degree, a medical degree, or you become a CA or something, like a lawyer. So I managed to convince my parents that this degree called actuarial science was a good compromise, right? Actuarial science is arguably very math heavy and a lot of statistics, and one can also get a reasonably good job after studying this degree because actually there's a high demand for them, and there are not that many around. And so it's kind of like it's a reasonably good job in finance and investments and insurance if you get through the degree. So I did actuarial science at the University of Cape Town, and I enjoyed it very much because of the mathematical content. And they also taught us a little bit of programming, which I thought was pretty cool. So then after the degree, I actually wanted to study my master's and continue with financial mathematics. But then my mom told me, no, you need to become a real person now. You're done with studying and you need to go get a job. So I did exactly that. I shopped around and I looked around and I thought this job was really cool. My first job was in actually a logistic company where I was working on predictive analytics. So I had to come up with models that would help optimize things like the traveling salesman problem, or even things like in HR where you want to predict based on how many days someone has taken, if they're likely to leave the company, and a whole bunch of interesting things that I had to do with qualitative data, which I was not very used to. So this was cool. And the fact that I was in predictive analytics then led me to discover machine learning, which was, I think, just like kind of gaining traction in Africa at the time. And when I found machine learning, like this concept of just taking some model, some family of functions and parameterizing it and then optimizing these parameters in all these cool ways, it was so amazing. And this is something I wanted to implement in my job and make it happen. But I was still very junior in my first job, and the company was not fast enough. It was not growing as fast as I liked. And I was this eager kid, like fresh out of university, and I really wanted to try something new here. So I did something crazy, as most people do when they're young, I think. And I saved up a little bit of money, and then I quit my job and went to Johannesburg. So Johannesburg in South Africa is, I think, like the equivalent of our New York, right? It's this concrete jungle that everybody who wants to work hard and is ambitious kind of goes there and builds their career. And especially if you're in the field of like finance and banking, Johannesburg in South Africa is the place to go. So I went there with no job and very little money, but luckily I had a lot of friends there. So I remember spending like a week on one friend's couch, sleeping there, and then a week on another friend's couch, and then like kind of going from couch to couch, but interviewing with so many companies, just trying really hard to find a job. And eventually, finally, I managed to make an impression on some people who worked at Stanlib Multi-Manager in particular. So this is the building here. It's a company. It's an asset management company in Melrose Arch in Johannesburg. And I started as a junior investment analyst. So I was tasked to do some technical research on investments. And because I studied actuarial science, this was a very good fit. And then I had expressed to them that I was very interested in machine learning as well. And so luckily they were quite a forward-thinking company, and they were open to me creating all these new ideas and projects. So I stayed there for, I think, just over 3 years. And in that time, I constantly tried out new things, right? So I helped out to build and initiate a robo-advisor project. So it's like trying to get AI to understand demographics of clients, and then advising them on how to invest their money to save for things like their education or buying a car, and kind of optimize the trajectory of their investment after they've made an investment. I also got involved at the time with really cool projects around cryptocurrency and blockchain, because people in investments were really excited about this and they wanted to understand more. So I managed to research that and learn about it. It was really cool. And then something also that I never wanted to stop was learning, right, outside of my job. So I found out what was the most valued title or education qualification that one can get in investments. And it turns out that something called the CFA exams, the Chartered Financial Analyst examinations, are really prestigious. And so I studied after hours to try and get this qualification. And I also did that at Standard as well. But even though things were really good and my career in investments was going rather well, I was on track to be quite successful. I think in 2 years I had already moved from the junior investment analyst to the head of research, basically reporting to the CIO of this big company. I just wasn't happy. I wasn't satisfied, and I couldn't understand why, because there was nothing tangibly wrong in my life. Everything was going in the right direction, until one day when I was watching a lecture on. I'll never forget this moment. I was watching a lecture on Brownian motion, and Brownian motion was used in finance a lot to describe the movement of a stock on a stock exchange. Right, there's this random component to it. And the lecturer was a physicist, and so he compared this equation that's used in finance quite often to another partial differential equation that's used in physics, the Schrodinger equation. And I thought this was absolutely amazing, that an equation can model some mechanisms through space and time, an equation that I could understand and follow. And physics, I'd never really opened myself up to it in high school, because it was actually my worst mark in high school. It was my worst performing subject, because I think it just wasn't taught very well. And I immediately closed myself off to it as a kid because I didn't understand it. But when it was explained in a way that I could understand it, this Schrodinger equation, I thought, wow, this is extremely fascinating. And it was like this lightning went through my body that I was like, okay, I have to find out more about this. And so I did, right? And thank goodness we live in such a beautiful time where information is so easily accessible, right? So we can just Google anything and learn so much about it. So I started going down in this road of physics and trying to find out, what are these big and beautiful questions about the universe and theories of relativity, all these crazy things that are very philosophical, but I didn't know too much about the technical aspects, so I wanted to gain this knowledge as well. And while these things were all very fascinating, I still didn't know what exactly would I do with this, until I found the field of quantum machine learning and quantum computing. And then I immediately knew that this was the thing that I needed to pursue, because quantum machine learning, I'm sure everybody here is familiar with quantum computing and machine learning, separate fields. But for this new and emerging field of quantum machine learning that marries the two, it was it was everything that I'd been searching for, because it had a little bit of everything. You need to know a little bit of statistics for machine learning, a little bit of programming, a little bit of quantum mechanics, a little bit of mathematics that underpins everything, a little bit of all the technical fields that I had been interested in but didn't know how to put them together. And so I thought this was so fascinating and so cool. So I started to try and read about it. And I was just like, whoa, this is extremely difficult. This is something I can never do. This is crazy. Because I started reading research papers, which are highly specialized. This is one of the biggest mistakes that one can make. And I couldn't get it. So I then tried to reach out to my network. And I think this was really a key moment in my path, because I was still working at Standard, but I knew immediately then that I wanted to get out of finance and move into this field, into understanding quantum machine learning, quantum computing. And I also knew that I wanted to go back and study it because I lacked so much foundational knowledge. So I started reaching out to people everywhere. On LinkedIn, I mostly had people in finance and investments. This was actually quite hard. I wrote to every South African professor in physics, and I said, these are my qualifications. Who will take me? Nobody wrote back. I think actually one person wrote back, and that was really nice, but it didn't really take off or go anywhere. I also started looking at research papers and then contacting the authors of papers in the fields that I thought were cool. But then eventually I met in person two people at Stanlib who I had heard gotten PhDs in theoretical physics. I thought, oh, this is amazing. Let me reach out to them and try and see if they have any advice. And it turns out they did. They put me in touch directly with their supervisors, who were researchers at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where I am currently now based. So for those of you who don't know, the University of KwaZulu-Natal is a university in Durban, which is actually my hometown where I grew up in all this time. And I thought it was absolutely mind-blowing that all this time, the thing that I was so passionate about was in my hometown all along, and I had no idea. So I immediately flew home from Johannesburg to Durban. Like, I think after meeting these two guys who had their PhDs, I set up a meeting with their professor, who's from the UKZN group, who's now my professor. And then I think like maybe in 2 days, I flew to Durban and had a talk with him, told him everything about myself and how I was like super passionate about this and wanted to get into it, but I have no knowledge, I don't understand it, but I will work really hard. And they took a chance on me. And so then I enrolled for my master's. Thankfully, I was able to support myself, right? So I'm again very lucky to have a very good support system. I could come home, I could live with my parents for a year and do my master's, and I didn't have any financial obligations. So this was, not always a luxury that people have, but I'm very grateful for this. And it was tough. I mean, the first 6 months of my master's, not even knowing what Hamiltonian is in physics, and then now you're thrown into quantum computing research. It was difficult. I had also been working in industry for about 4 years, and you forget things like matrix multiplication, like basic things that you should know. So I had to, for the first 6 months, relearn a lot of basic concepts, and it was wonderful. It was actually so exhilarating. And I think this is really important, to have this mindset of not to be intimidated by things you don't know, but rather excited by things you don't know, because anything that you don't know, you can definitely find out and learn, right? I mean, the information that's there is there. It's just a matter of working through it over and over until it eventually makes sense. And so for the first 6 months of my master's, that's all I did, was just sit and learn. In the day, I would attend lectures. In the evening, I would attend online lectures. When I was running, I would listen to physics podcasts. I would just try to learn as much and absorb as much as possible. And this was a really good approach, in my opinion, because the next 6 months of my master's was filled with wonderful experiences and exciting achievements. And I strongly believe that if I'm somebody who can come from no background to do something interesting in quantum computing or a brand new field, then anybody can, right? And so these are just some pictures of some highlights of conferences that I've spoken at and attended and learned so much and met amazing people. We also participated in hackathons. I went to this hackathon in Zurich not knowing anybody at all, right? And the people that were invited to this hackathon were super intimidating. They were all from fancy universities, right? Like Yale, Harvard, all these crazy names. And here I come from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And then we actually finished first in the entire hackathon. And this was incredible. So something I also want to highlight is that it doesn't matter so much where you come from, because nowadays top class information is available for anybody. So you can really do amazing things that's competitive on a global level. And so these are just some cool things that happened in the remainder of my master's. And then after being kind of trying to make myself a little bit more known in the field of quantum computing, right, because of these wonderful experiences and learning so much my master's, I then met some people from IBM in Zurich and qualified for an internship, which I just finished up now. So I was meant to spend a couple of months there, but unfortunately to COVID, I spent 1 month there before I had to come back home, but I've been working remotely. And I got to work on quantum machine learning, which was a thing that I've always wanted to understand and study. And I studied statistical complexity of quantum models for 6 months, and it was absolutely fantastic. So this was a really, really wonderful experience that I would not have gotten going the traditional path, of just staying in my job and learning about the thing I'm passionate about after hours. I made this switch, and I'm very grateful for it, because then it opened me up to all these new wonderful experiences and opportunities. And whilst at IBM, I also applied for a Google PhD fellowship, which I never in a million years thought that I would get. I honestly just, I thought, let me try, because because they have now this new category for quantum computing. I think it's relatively new. I think maybe this is the third year that they awarded to people from a quantum computing category. And this was really such amazing news as well. And I'm extremely grateful, and also something that, you know, I wouldn't have gotten unless I had just tried and put myself out there. And so this is also something I really encourage you to do. A lot of the time people think that they're not good enough. They don't have the qualifications. They don't have the research publications. I mean, I don't have research publication. I have got one publication. I still tried and I put myself out there and got accepted for this. So this is the thing that I want to highlight to you. Okay, and then the last couple of things I just want to say is just some things that I wish people had told me, time traveled back and told me when I was younger, or maybe not even when I was younger, just before I figured these things out. And then I'll stop talking and we can have a nice open discussion. But so the first thing is, like, keep looking for the thing that excites you. So if you haven't found your passion as yet, or you still feel like you're kind of figuring it out, and this can happen for a very long time, right? I highly encourage you to keep searching for it, because when you find it, it's just so worth it, and everything becomes immediately clear about what you need to do to restructure your life, to focus on the thing that you're passionate about, and work no longer feels like work. It's just the thing that you're meant to do, and it's really an indescribable feeling. And if you're not unsure of how to keep looking, or how do you even find it? I think keep educating yourself, right? Keep yourself open to learning new things. Don't close yourself off to stuff that you're scared about because you don't know enough about it. I think a lot of people feel this way about machine learning and AI, and because it's this huge beast of research and knowledge, and it's fast paced, that people often just shut it out. So educate yourself, keep learning, and if you find something interesting, I say maybe stay away from research papers at first, because research papers are often so specialized. This is something that threw me off a little bit from quantum machine learning. I thought I could never ever do this, because the papers are just some papers are so hard to read. So, educate yourself, but also don't be scared if you see something that is super technical and that doesn't make sense at first, because it can eventually if you just work hard enough. And yes, speaking of working hard, I strongly believe that this is the simple formula to getting anything you want in life. It's very cliche, but I 100% stand by this. It's just hard work. It's that simple. And like I said, when you're working on the thing that you're passionate about, it doesn't feel like work anymore. So it's really quite a nice approach and philosophy to have. It's just this work ethic, and then once your results will definitely come from this, and then you will be recognized and awarded for this. Something that's also quite important, and I think a lot of people hesitate to do this when they're from a technical field or background, especially people who are quite introverted, but you need to be politely proactive. So I say politely because often you might come across rude when you reach out to people. So you always have to put yourself out there. You have to try connect and network with people, because this is just really important. And you have to do it in a way that's polite, it's approachable, and that makes you likable to people. It makes people want to help you. So a lot of my opportunities, in fact, most of my opportunities that I've gotten are through people I've met along the way, who I've had an interesting chat with, or we've had a nice experience shared together. And this is really, really, really quite important, because human beings are just wired this way. They'll help you if you get along, if you're nice to them. So this is something that's quite cool. And I can't tell you how many times I get really rude messages from people on LinkedIn that are just like, show me this formula, or explain this to me. Like, this is crazy. Like, how can you talk to someone like this? So just be a little bit cognizant of people and their time, and express your interest and reach out to interesting people and learn from them. Okay, something I also mentioned a bit earlier is that you can do high quality research from wherever you are, right? So if I can do interesting things from Durban in South Africa, you can do interesting things from any remote place in the world, as long as you have, hopefully, internet connection. This is not always there, but this is, I think, the basic requirement. And then also something I hinted at a little bit earlier is that 99% of the time, people make things happen for people, right? Not processes. And this is actually something I hated when I was growing up, because I always believed that if you work hard enough, then your work will get recognized on its own. And if I'm going to apply, for example, for a job on Google and I've worked my whole life for it, I will get it. But this is not how the world works. Actually, people do things for people. It is so, so important to make yourself different and known in communities that you want to get into. And it sounds stupid and annoying, but it's unfortunately the way it works. And people are people help people. Like this is what I mean. So most of the time processes are bypassed, because if I meet you and I find you interesting and I know you're interesting, I'm going to take that over someone's canonical CV that looks like everybody else's CV. So this is something important. This is something I learned throughout my journey, is that you have to kind of find people that can help you and then motivate them as to why they need to help you. And this one's going to sound very cheesy and cliche, but again, I strongly believe this. Is like, if you believe you can do something, then you can, right? So when I was trying to get back into academia and learn about, I couldn't even get through a research paper properly without Googling every single term. And I thought, this is crazy. Like, how am I ever going to get to a stage where I can write my own research, let alone understand this stuff? But I never lost the belief. I always knew that I could do it. It was just a matter of pushing through, reading something 10 to 20 times before it started to make sense to do it. And that was the key thing, is that you must never give up. Everything is learnable, no matter who you are, as long as you just you continue, you keep trying and you keep going, and don't lose that belief and get discouraged. It's very easy in research to go through these waves where some days you think you're doing great, and then some days you're like, oh, why am I doing this? This is all crap. This is terrible. But you have to just push through that down until you go up again, and it ends up being worth it. And then the last thing I wanted to say is just that mathematics is something to approach one step at a time, and it's so beautiful. So I know that you guys are probably learning a lot of maths courses right now, and I just never, I think recently in this last internship, I've just started to grow such an appreciation for mathematics, because I've been very fortunate to be guided by a very, very good mathematician who has taught me to pivot my thoughts in such a different way. So like he thinks in a very geometrical interpretation of the world. And it's just, it's made me realize that mathematics is so wonderful and so beautiful. And there's so many pieces and elements to it, but understanding it takes time, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed. But if you approach it one step at a time, you start to see these pieces fit together, and it's just so, so wonderfully beautiful. So this is just something I wanted to remind you and hopefully inspire you to keep going and learning. Okay, and with that is like all my slides that I have. Please feel free to contact me, email. I'm fastest at replying via email. I'm terrible on LinkedIn, but I also reply on Twitter quite quickly, I think. So yes, let me stop sharing my screen now and see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Amira, for sharing all that with us. And like, my journey in the academia has been very straightforward, unlike yours. And it's like, it's really amazing to see how you have gone through all of this. And I think people here have also been quite interested by that. And there are a few questions. I believe the first or the most interesting one is based on your last slide, and it's about, say, if you don't have any undergraduate research, then will that affect your chances or to go into grad school or get a job in quantum computing?
Yeah, this is a good point, right? So if it was me, if for example I had my own startup and I was looking to hire people, I wouldn't care which university you came from. what qualifications you had, but what I would look for are things like, have you contributed to open source projects? Do you have like proof that you can actually do work in quantum computing? I think this is super important, right? But if you want to go to a company like IBM or Google, then they just have these standard processes in their hiring where they have to have these quality checks that you have a PhD, that you have a master's, blah, blah, blah. And so it really depends on you and your personality. So like, I personally think that not having the strong mathematics in your undergrad is not a bad thing, because you can learn this, right? You can learn, there's beautiful linear algebra courses. MIT courses are open source. You can learn everything on your own. You can even write the exams. And so this is not such a barrier as it used to be. But if you want to end up in the legacy companies, then I think this is unfortunate that you have to try to get your master's and your PhD, and you have to prove to people that you can do the work, the mathematics, that you have the strong technical competence. So when I went to talk to my current professor in physics, I had actuarial science finance, right? And I had to do a lot of convincing to him that I can do this master's in physics, because I have no classical physics, and I still don't. I think I'm actually really bad at this. But I managed to talk my way into it, and also to prove very quickly, right, with hard work. And I think you also need to find the right people that can help you. So people and learning and motivation. And if you still are young enough and have time to switch, then and you want to end up in a company like Google, then this is probably a better thing. But if you're open to working for a startup in quantum computing, or contributing to the community and joining from that perspective, then this is something you can also do. If that helps.
Yeah, does. I think that does answer the question, and thank you for that. But suppose if someone does want to do some kind of research, let's say in quantum machine learning, then from what will be the thing that they should begin with, or how can they start doing some research on quantum machine learning or quantum computing by themselves? So
this is a really nice question, and also difficult because it depends on your background, right? So what you have is how you, it changes how you should approach things. So I think a very general, nice way to approach quantum machine learning is simultaneously trying to understand both quantum computing and machine learning. So if you don't have either of those, there are two like fundamental textbooks that I would recommend to understand quantum computing and machine learning. So for machine learning, this is the Deep Learning textbook by Ian Goodfellow, right? I mean, this one is wonderful, is a wonderful place to start. And then in quantum computing, the Bible is the Nielsen and Chuang Quantum Computation and Quantum Information. Both of these textbooks are available for free PDFs online if you just Google them. Starting to read these textbooks and getting a little bit of understanding of both, you will realize very quickly that you need linear algebra in both fields, and you will realize very quickly that both fields fit so wonderfully together because so much of the math is very similar. Then I would recommend reading a textbook in quantum machine learning once you feel comfortable in both of these sections. So once you feel like you've got the basics of quantum, you've got the basics of machine learning, then I would recommend reading a textbook called Supervised Learning for Quantum Computers by Maria Schult and Francesco Petrocini. These are actually my supervisors. The book is a little bit expensive, but it's definitely worth getting, because it's also, and there's a new edition coming out actually, so I'd wait for this. And this really contains a wonderful overview of quantum machine learning and the state of the field right now. And there's also a very nice review paper, I think, by Peter Wittig, that it might be a little bit outdated right now, but this also like talks about quantum machine learning. So this is a nice place to start. And there are also lots of free resources, right? By IBM, their Qiskit community, their coding community. So if you're a programmer and if you want to do hands-on stuff, learning with code, go this route. There's Qiskit, Qiskit. I'm sure everyone knows. And there's also Microsoft. They have their Kata, so I think it's called, I can't remember, on GitHub. So there are lots of open source resources. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And I believe the next question is did you start your quantum computing journey after you joined your PhD, or like during your master's, or in which year did you begin that effectively?
So it was when I mentioned, like, I watched this video and I had this epiphany, right, that the physics was the thing. This was in June. No, what's month before June? May 2018. This was the month, and then I started my master's in July 2018. So it took 2 months for me to transition from my job to academia once I figured this out. And so I officially started like quantum computing research, my master's, which was in July 2018. And again, I think also timing here was I was very lucky, right? Because this was just when things were getting exciting and there was a lot of traction in the field. There still is, but yeah, I just feel very fortunate to have found this at the right time, because had I gone straight into academia after my job, probably would have just done financial mathematics or something like this, and yeah, it wouldn't have been too fun.
Yeah. And the next question is, do you have any favorite topic in mathematics?
Do I have any favorite
topic
topic?
you really like?
So something that I find quite fascinating right now is, again, going to tie it to machine learning theory. So in statistical learning theory, there is this lovely use of risk approximation, right? So you want to kind of bound. So okay, let me start by saying you can have a model, a machine learning model, and you want to understand how well it generalizes. So how well does it perform on new data that it hasn't seen before? And in machine learning, we didn't really know how to do this until we borrowed some concepts from statistical learning theory, which tries to understand the true error that's associated with the model and approximate the true error by data that we observe. And so you can bound this true error and this approximated error by a measure of a model's complexity or capacity. So we can try and understand how many functions can a model fit, right? And this is something I find really, really fascinating right now, because there are lots of different ways to do this. Nobody really knows how you should measure a model's complexity. There are lots of ways to try. And so what I'm really excited about right now is like these generalization proofs, proving these theorems that depend on some capacity measure to kind of bound this generalization error. So this is something I really find quite nice, and relies a little bit on understanding, like mathematics and different function classes. And I think this is really, really quite fascinating. And another thing I also quite like is kernel theory, the idea of kernels. I used to think it was quite straightforward that quantum computing and quantum computing circuits give rise to kernels, but actually this is not so trivial. So I'm trying to understand this. And also in machine learning, there is this idea of neural tangent kernels, which is super, super cool, because there's so much kernel theory out there historically, and now we can tie neural networks to kernels, to this neural tangent kernels. So this is also really quite beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been also trying to work with those neural tangent kernels, and they are pretty amazing field of research. Thank you.
Awesome.
I think the next question would be, do you have any particular course in quantum computing that you would advise people to take?
Yeah, so I personally started with trying to understand quantum mechanics, right? So I started with I think it was MIT or Stanford's undergraduate course in quantum mechanics. I think it's Stanford, yeah. So it's online and it's also free. And this got me familiar with terminology, right? So if you're not from physics, this was really important. Like then I could understand what things like Hamiltonians were, and operators and observables. And then once you have this, then I really recommend the quantum information. In fact, I think I have it open. Oh gosh, no. sorry, I almost left the website. There's a course, an edX course by, I'm just trying to find the name. It's called Quantum Information Processing.
Sure.
It's a 3-part course. It's a 3-part course by Isaac Chuang. And I think Peter Shaw is actually a lecturer as well, but he's not, I mean, shame, he's not as good as Isaac. And this is a really, really great, beautiful course. And then if you want to do quantum machine learning, then there is this MOOC, this open source course called Quantum Machine Learning by Peter Vitek and a few guest lectures. And if you're looking for all these resources, Quantum Open Source Foundation, just Google Quantum Open Source Foundation. On their GitHub page, they have all of the stuff listed there, all these learning resources, all these wonderful courses, all these open source software frameworks that you can play around with. So this is probably the best place to go.
Yeah, thank you. The next question is actually from me, essentially. So I was wondering, what's your approach towards politely being proactive?
Yeah, this is
work with
yeah.
the community. I think that's probably
Yeah.
the most useful for everyone here who are looking for jobs and everything.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so it's a difficult one, right? Because there are so many people trying to be active in the community and looking for jobs and looking for things. So the one thing you need to do is you need to find something that makes you different, something that differentiates yourself from the rest, right? So you mentioned, Sam, that like your journey has been quite straightforward. You're a physics undergrad and physics postgrad, I think, and then your next step, is going to postdoc or something in physics. But there has to be something that makes you special, right? Like maybe you are also like this prodigy in playing the violin or something, something that differentiates you from someone. And then you take that and you combine it with your interest, and then you implement an insane music theory paper that gets recognized in quantum computing, because nobody knows music theory in quantum computing, right? Like, just as an example. And then once you do things like that differentiate yourself, it makes it easier to reach out to people. So I highly recommend not reaching out to people until you have reason to do so. So don't just, I mean, chances are you're going to get rejected or not responded to if you're just asking for help or you're asking generic questions. You need to ask interesting questions. And when you reach out to certain people, you need to find out what their interests are, what they're doing, and ask them thought-provoking questions that actually interest them, right? So not just generic questions. And then you differentiate yourself like this, and you get yourself recognized, and you start to build an interesting brand for yourself, and people want to start to help you. So I think this is a nice way to approach things. So like, not just be like everybody else, but try and figure out what makes you special and unique and use it to your advantage.
Yep, thank you. That was a very excellent piece of advice for everyone here, I believe. Do you have any idea of what's the next decade for quantum computing will be like, or if we'll be using that for any practical purposes?
Yes, it's so hard to say, right? Because at this moment, it's almost kind of like anyone's guess, because some innovation could just come in and change everything in the hardware, right? And but there is still very fast, good incremental progress in the machines that we do have today, and improvements. So I think in terms of scalable applications, definitely, right? I mean, there already are algorithms that are being rolled out, that are being implemented in industry. So Microsoft, for example, have an algorithm that runs on a quantum annealer that, so what it does is when you go into an MRI scanner, typically you spend like 30 minutes in this giant machine, and then they scan your brain. But thanks to a quantum algorithm, they've managed to reduce the time that you have to spend in this thing by a third. So you only spend 10 minutes instead of 30, and it also enhances the scans. And they're actually rolling this out now to hospitals in the US. And this is so cool, right? Because think about like children or people who are claustrophobic and have to spend 30 minutes in this machine. So this is like really impactful. And this is something that can work on D-Wave's annealer at the moment. So I think, and also in terms of chemistry, I think we're going to see so many applications. Like, things we can already not do are being done. So I think it's very exciting, and I hope that that advancements in hardware just come in as well and just like spur everything. But also what's cool about the industry of quantum computing is like we're finally seeing partnerships now between industry, academia, and working together and collaboration. And so it's like really cool, really fast-paced startups. And yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting space, fast-paced, very a lot of low-hanging fruit that we have.
Yeah. I believe we are all looking forward to that. And I think the final question for today is, what's the history behind your Twitter handle?
Oh man, that was a very good question. So mathematics is a love of mine, and morphisms in mathematics are just kind of mappings from one space to another, right? So I thought it was a little bit clever to have this a meromorphism as like as a mathematical joke. Maybe it's not so smart, but but I thought it also sounded cool, like a meromorphism linked together. But yeah, that was the story. Not so exciting. It was not a lot of thought put into it. But thanks for the question. It was funny.
Yep. Well, thank you, Amita, for taking the time to answer all of those and for such an excellent presentation for everyone here. It was really nice to meet you. And hopefully we'll look forward to what you're doing in with quantum machine learning, and maybe we can join you sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for listening, everybody, and I appreciate it a lot. Good. Cool. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.